Alright, so today we are solving another FAANG style SQL interview question called market analysis. Now in this problem we are given two tables, users and orders. Now the users table contain the information about when each user joined the platform. For example, user 1 joined on January 1st, 2018, user 2 joined on February 9th, 2018 and so on. Next we have the orders table which records every order placed on the platform. And each order contains an order ID, the order date and the buyer ID, which tells us which user placed that order. Now the task is to compute the number of orders each user made in the year 2019. And one important detail over here is that every user must appear in the final output, even if they did not place any orders in 2019. So if a user did not place any orders that year, their count should simply be 0. So the final result should include 3 columns: buyer ID, join date and orders in 2019. Now maybe let's walk through how we can solve this step by step. So the first step is to filter the orders that were placed in the year 2019. So if we look at the orders table, some orders happened in 2018 and some in 2019. Now since the question only asks about the orders in 2019, we just ignore any orders outside this time range, right? And after this filtering step, we only keep the rows where the order date falls within the year 2019. Next, we count the number of orders per buyer. Now once we have only the orders in 2019, we group the rows by buyer ID, and for each buyer, we simply count how many rows exist. For example, user 1 placed 2 orders in 2019, user 2 placed 1 order and user 3 placed 1 order again, right? So this gives us a small aggregated table where each buyer has their total number of orders in 2019. Now we join this aggregated result with the users table, right? And the reason we do this is because the final output must include every user even if they did not place any order in 2019, right? So to ensure we keep all the users, we use a left join over here, and this means every row from the users table will appear in the final result while the orders count will be attached wherever available, right? Now after performing the left join, some users may still have null values for the order count, right? And this happens when a user did not place any orders in 2019. Now to fix this, we use the coalesce function which replaces null with 0, right? So if a user has no orders in 2019, their count becomes 0 instead of null, right? Finally, we return the required columns, that is the buyer ID, join date and orders in 2019, and this gives us the final result of the problem. So now having understood the step-by-step solution, now maybe let's look at the SQL query that implements this logic. So we start by creating a common table expression called orders_count, and this temporary table calculates how many orders each buyer placed in the year 2019. And to do this, we read the data from the orders table and first filter the rows so that we only keep the orders that happened during 2019. Now once we have only the relevant orders, we group those rows by buyer ID, which allows us to collect all the orders belonging to the same buyer together, right? Then for each buyer group, we simply count the number of rows, and that count represents the total number of orders that particular buyer placed in the year 2019. So after this step, we have a small aggregated table that contains 2 columns, that is the buyer_ID and the number of orders they placed in the year 2019, right? Now next, we create another CT which is called the final table, right? And in this step, we combine the users table with the aggregated order counts we just calculated, right? So we start with the users table because the final output must include every user regardless of whether they placed an order or not. Then we perform a left join with the order count table, right? Matching the user ID with the buyer ID. And this join attaches the number of orders to each user wherever a matching row exists. However, if a user did not place any orders in the year 2019, the join will produce a null value for the order count. And to handle this, we wrap the order count inside the coalesce function, which converts those null into zeros, right? So at the end of this step, we now have a table that contains the user ID, the join date, and the number of orders each user placed in the year 2019. Finally, the outer query simply selects the data from the final table CTE, right? So we return all the columns from that table and sort the results by buyer ID so that the output appears in a clean and consistent order, right? And this produces the final output. Each user appears exactly once along with their join date and the number of orders they placed in the year 2019, and the users who did not place any orders that year are still included in the result and their order count correctly appears as 0, right? So that's the entire solution, and this is a very common pattern in the data engineering SQL interview rounds. So do practice it well, and now I will see you in the next problem.